should you, as a manager, be rational or irrational? Well, obviously, you're always rational. You don't let emotions drive everything. Everything should be intellectually driven and just a linear pathway from A, B, C, D. Always, always, always. Really? Just so you know, that's not quite true. Let's talk about the aspect of what is a rational decision. Number one, the hardest part, as I mentioned before, is always defining the problem. When you talk about it, you have to drop your voice down a little bit, say, defining the problem. You really have to determine that this is the problem and not surface issues. A lot of times, you look on the surface issue and you think that's the problem, but sometimes you have to dive deeper into the organization to find out, is it the lack of communication? Is it this? Is it that? Maybe you have a person in the wrong spot. Maybe you have to sit down and find out what it is. A lot of times, having multiple eyes on the issue and listening to people, that's a lot of times the best way to figure out what the problem really is. But once you identify that problem, or let's rephrase it, opportunity, okay, think up the different solutions. There's obvious ones and there's creative ones. I like brainstorming. For me, that has always worked extraordinarily well, including having a lot of people involved helping identify the problem and also solutions to the problem without criticizing them until we actually sit down and spend a separate time actually going through and start figuring out the money and the timelines and so on. But the reality of it really comes down to look at the problem, have a multiple different solutions, evaluate each one of them, select one of them, look for all the feasibility, the effectiveness as of, is this something that you want to do as a company and be associated with it, and then implement and evaluate the one that's chosen. That is a rational way of doing things, and that's how we should always do business because we're a rational company. Here it is again. Identify the problem, think up the alternative solution, evaluate them, select the solution, and implement. That's how we do it all the time. When you identify the problem, there's no shortage of them because you're going to have them typically every Monday morning. I stop scheduling meetings on Monday mornings every single time. You know what? It doesn't matter how well run it is. It's a matter of Mondays, something always sits there and goes sideways. It seems like it. I think just the common sense aspect of it, never schedule a meeting on Monday morning. I had a boss, my chancellor, he wanted to have a meeting of all the vice chancellors on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Well, we're just breathing, getting our coffee ready at 8 o'clock in the morning. And so we have to show up in his office and have our meeting Monday morning because he said. And finally, after about a year and a half of this, I says, why don't we have it Monday afternoon? And everybody breathed a sigh of relief. I just said the obvious. We moved it to Monday afternoon, and then we can come in and be relaxed and talk about C-suite level issues because of the fact that all the different debris was cleared off of our plates and we could focus in on the problem. There's lots of opportunities if you solve the problem right and look at that. When you're confronted with a problem or opportunity, okay, you called on to make improvements. Don't just fix the problem, make certain the problem doesn't reoccur because your solution is that good. So then develop the alternatives, and sometimes you don't pay attention to yourself. Sometimes you go out and you look at people that do the work. If you are 2 or 3 or 4 levels above the people that the problem impacts, you need to get out of your office and go talk to those people. Wander down the hallway, go sit in a chair, and go listen to somebody doing the work. It's going to be years before you hit that level to be in the C-suite, but that said, make certain that you're sitting in the chair of the people that have to solve the problem. Once you sit there, you have a problem, you have an opportunity to diagnose the causes, and then come up with solutions. When you evaluate the various alternatives, the different solutions you have to sit down and look at the aspect of data, artificial intelligence if you can, but my experience so far is artificial intelligence is only a mediocre tool at this point. I simply don't trust it. I've seen it make too many errors and be influenced by social media. And quite frankly, it's rather disappointing that the fact that you can't sit down and say, are you going to do this in the future? And AI says, yes, I will. And it turns around and actually lies to you. I've run a couple experiments that way, and I'm really disappointed at what I'm seeing. And I'm not certain we're going to see that corrected for years to come. It's a great research tool if you can trust the research, that the AI hasn't sat down and sapped itself from some pool of information that was poorly done and had no validity to it. So be careful on using AI. A lot of times better decisions can be made by having more people involved. Implementation is often straightforward, sometimes it's quite difficult. But sometimes the rationality, you have to think in the spur of the moment. You have to think in a narrow time window, and you don't have time to sit down there and do a study. You don't have time to sit down there and spend the money. Sometimes you have to decide there on the spot. One time, I was in negotiations with the police union. And so we're talking, and they opened up right away with what I felt was a totally vulgar, insulting commentary that I felt insulted a lot of people, including all the women on planet Earth, had gone through a certain criminal activity. And I'm going to leave the aspect and let you to your imagination. So by the time it was done, I had the opening statement. And when you have a statement like that, that's crude and vulgar, you have a narrow window that's much less than 10 seconds where you have to respond. You have to pause before you respond. You might note that I talk rather quickly. I also think rather quickly. And in that moment, I had all these different thoughts. I have about 5 or 6 seconds to respond what just was said. Now, that being said, I'm going to tell you that if I was inexperienced, there is no textbook that told me how to do this. There is nobody, if I was the first year rookie in the process, I could never have done this. Except I've been at negotiations for over 10 years when this came up. So this comment came up. And I sat down there and I had a way. Number one, I could pretend the comment didn't happen. I could just go on and say, well, you know what? Let's get down to the business over here. Or the third option, I could sit down there and display my anger at what was said and threaten to walk out. And that's the option I chose. I sat down there and I says, how dare you sit there in a uniform with a badge on representing law and order, and you come up with such a vulgar, insulting statement to every single person that's gone through being sexually raped across planet Earth, thinking that applies to you. How dare you do that? You insult the badge, you insult the uniform, you apologize right now, or we're walking. The room got deathly quiet. I waited. And I was getting ready to gather my stuff out to walk. And they apologized just about 7 different times. And keep in mind, I'm experienced in the process. I don't think you react in an emotional phase, except I use the tool of emotion to express something. I wanted to knock them back on their heels, get negotiations done. We finished negotiations, not that session, but the next one. It was all wrapped up. I embarrassed them so much. We finished it quickly, and I got what they wanted. They kind of got what they wanted, but the reality was negotiation was done. I used emotion as a tool to get what I wanted by being irrational. There was no rational way to respond in the situation. You will be confronted with that. When you're confronted with the aspect of here is a situation I've never known about, there's no way to prepare for it, you will be called upon as a leader, as a manager, to sit down there and step up to the plate and make a decision. Too often, people do not make decisions at all, and they just kind of pawn it off on somebody else. Except keep in mind, I was pretty clear when I talked about what my goal is. I want to give you that experience so you will be successful. Sometimes there's a rational model, and sometimes you have to respond based upon your experience and or your instinct. It's a logical, unemotional analysis. You have to sit down there and not use your emotions to make a decision. Quite frankly, I think emotions, it is wrong to make decisions with your emotions. I do believe that once the logical part of your head as a leader kicks in, you can use your emotions as a tool. If you have any questions, read my book, Backboneology, Tough Decisions at Work. I think it really will help in the aspect of taking that emotion and using it as a tool. Non-rational decision making, a lot of times it is so complex, It is almost impossible to sit down and figure out what the problem is. And then sometimes you have to make a decision in that moment. And sometimes the money may prohibit you from doing the analysis you want to do, or maybe even the best fix. Sometimes you have to use bubble gum and baling wire to fix a motor just to make certain the motor starts and gets going for a little bit while you get the proper part that's ordered and is coming about 2 weeks later. Sometimes you have to sit down and look at your cognitive capacity, your values, your skills and habits as what's out there, because you're relying on imperfect information, or you have too much information, different priorities, and conflicting goals in the process. Sometimes it just feels right. Okay, that might work, except you're basing it upon your past experience. Sometimes nothing can replace that experience in the process. Small entrepreneurs, a lot of times they can't do market research on this. They have to make decisions based on hunches. That's just part of being an entrepreneur. Sometimes the intuition stems from expertise. Sometimes it is a matter of feelings. Well, this is the best way. And sometimes you're sitting there thinking, this is me. This is my ethics. I'm going to make a decision that's contrary to financial sense. I'm going to do this because this is the right thing. Now, by the way, nowadays it's almost ridiculous if you say, I'm doing this because I think it's the right thing. People may make fun of you doing the right thing. I don't see anything wrong with doing the right thing. If you do, okay, you have a different value system than me, because sometimes I will make a decision based upon right and wrong. And I think we need to articulate that sometimes, that this is the right thing to do, because that is our ethics and our value system kicking in on decision making. Be rational or irrational. Always try to use rationality in each and every single problem. Make certain you have a problem definition, create the solutions, evaluate and process. But sometimes you need to rely on that intuition that burns in your gut. Sometimes burning your gut is a matter of using the emotion as a tool. Never, in my opinion, make a decision based upon your emotion. If your emotions are grabbing you and driving you, pause. Do not respond in a moment of emotion. Sleep on it and come back the next day if you can, and make certain that if you're going by intuitive aspects, that you have a reasoning behind it that you can defend a year later. But always make certain that whenever you make a decision, you can look at yourself in the mirror the next day and be true to yourself. Take care.